Let's begin. We are on Daf Vav Amud Bet. The Gemara in Vav Amud Bet is in the middle of this case of separated witnesses. Witnesses that are seeing things from two different perspectives. And then we just saw the opinion of Rava, that Rava added in 6b3, if you're following the art scroll, Rava added a new perspective on the person who's giving the warning. In the Mishnah, we had Rav Yossi says that the warning needs to be administered by two witnesses. Remember that? And he brought as proof al pi shnayim edim, through the mouth of two witnesses, indicating that through the speech of two witnesses are our cases upheld. And therefore he brings it that it's two witnesses. Comes Rava. Rava says, no, even from the guy's mouth himself, we saw two different opinions to what that means. Either it means that the victim said, don't kill me. If you kill me, there's a death penalty, right? The second he says that, you know that there's hatra being given, even though it's not through witnesses, even though it's him himself. Two opinions, if that's referring to the victim or the murderer. But if either one of them says the hatra, tells them, you can't do this, you're not allowed, and there's a death penalty, or you can't steal this, you're going to get Malkut, or whatever the case would be, that the warning consists of, even if it's the victim or the thief or the perpetrator himself. Even if it's said by a demon, even if it's mentioned by a bat call, even if it comes of a voice, a disembodied voice that we don't know. In other words, what if you just heard a voice say, don't do it? It might be someone anywhere, but we don't know where it came from. It doesn't matter. We don't have to establish where it came from. All we need to know is that the person received hatra, received a warning, and once they received that warning, we could assume that the person already knows the importance of what they're doing, and if that's the case, then we have enough to be able to have the punishment. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman continues and says, Edut miyuchedet keshera bedine mamonot. Vav Amud Bet 6b3. If you're following in the Gemara over here says, right, Amar Rav Nachman. It's right about in the middle of the fat lines. Got it? Right here? Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Edut miyuchedet keshera bedine mamonot. Now, by the way, as we go through and we're learning more and more Gemara, I would hope that slowly but surely you'll migrate out of the English and into the page, okay? But in order to do that, what you need to do is not wait for me to translate, but also listen as I'm reading it in English, reading it in Hebrew before I translate it to English. So let's just take a look at that. Amar Rav Nachman, who could translate that? Rav Nachman said, Edut, witnesses or testimony, miyuchedet, which is miyuchad, which is unique, which is isolated apart, keshera bedine mamonot, is kosher in the laws of money. You see, if you could read that, you're reading the Gemara. Right. But a lot of times people don't fathom that they could learn the Gemara, so they don't bother trying, and really, they actually slowly but surely would be able to work it out if they were focusing on seeing how those words played out. So if you're comfortable, it will be great for you to follow on the Hebrew side as well. Okay? Says the Gemara. Edut miyuchedet kishera b'dinei mamunot. So if you have isolated witnesses, what do we explain that case is? One person in one window, one person in the other window. The halakha is that it's enough for those two witnesses to be connected when it comes to the laws of money. So two people say, one in that window, who can't see each other, are seeing that the guy borrowed $50. Okay, issue of monetary concern. So the halakha is, you would combine them and you would count that testimony. Dichtiv, because the pasuk says, "Lo yumat al pi ed echad." You cannot kill. You cannot use capital punishment based on one witness. Now, if you remember, the Gemara said that we made a dirasha that witnesses need to be combined. Do you remember from where? From this pasuk. So we said, through two or three witnesses, something stands. Lo yumat al pi ed echad. He should not die by the hand of one. you don't need the second one, because if you tell me that you need two, I know that if you have one, it doesn't work, right? Why did it tell me, if you have one, he shall not die? The Gemara answered to tell you that if the edut is miyuchedet, right, if they're separated, you can't combine it based on the testimony of one. Not one by himself. That I know from the first part, that you need two. It's telling you if there's ones, a one and a one, don't make it two. That's where we learned from this pasuk. Says Rav Nachman, if that's where I learned the exclusion of edut miyuchedet, of isolated witnesses, okay, then read the rest of the pasuk. Lo yumat, he should not die. It's only in capital punishment that we have that exclusion. But b'dinei nefashot u'de'en kshera, that's when it's not kosher. Aval b'dinei mamonot kshera, when it comes to monetary issues, you could combine the two. The Gemara says, Matkif la Rav Zutra. Rav Zutra asks a question. I don't understand. That doesn't work for me. Bedin nefashot tatzil. In the laws of nefashot, okay, when it comes to a case, a capital case, let what you just said save them. How would that be? How would that work? How would it save them? The answer is, let's say, if you're telling me that for the sake of mamonot, I could combine them, right? If I could, then in a scenario where the combining would work to save the person, or it's if they're combinable, and you just told me, right, because they're combinable for money, right? So when it comes to a case of capital punishment, let me combine them for a kula. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. Ask the Gemara. Let's look at the question the Gemara asks, and now you'll understand what Rav Zutra's question is. Alama tanan, why do we learn in the Mishnah, hu vehen neheragin, him and them are killed? It doesn't make sense. Let's review the case in the Mishnah where it says that. Two in this window, two in this window. One guy over here saying hatra, okay? Halakha is, if they saw each other, they're connected. If they did not see each other, they're not connected, right? Ask the Gemara, if isolated witnesses are combinable. In the case you told me, Edim Zomim come along when they did not see each other. Edim Zomim come along and Zomem these guys. What happens to these guys? They get killed. What happens to that guy? Because these Edim were not Zomemd. They kill him. Who? Vehen Neheragin. That's halakha. Asks Rav Zutra, if you could possibly combine isolated witnesses, let's say that these two witnesses, the two groups, are connected. In which case, what would happen? All of the edut is pasul.
Nobody gets killed. Nobody.
And they don't get zomemd. How come? Why? They were zomemd. Why not them?
Because they're connected.
Because the only time you could get zomem is when you zomem the whole people in the group. So if for the sake of capital punishment, we always try and find a lenient opinion, Rav Nachman's opinion would provide a lenient opinion to be able to... Now remember, we wouldn't do this lechumrah. So if you had one and one, and you're trying to kill the guy, we wouldn't do it. But for the sake of the kula, for the sake of saving them from death, we should rely on the fact that Rav Nachman says it's combinable. Let's combine them and kill nobody. Him not, because when you zomem 2 out of 4, 2 don't get zomem, but everyone is pasul, right? Because you invalidated part of the group, and them because you didn't zomem the whole group. So we found the kula on both ways. So the Gemara, he's asking on that opinion of the Gemara. Gemara says, kasha, you're right, it's a good question. But when we say kasha, it doesn't mean that we're knocking you out. We just say it's a question. We've already just had that, by the way. Right? We hear you. It's a good question you're asking. Right? But halakha is still like Rav Nachman. Now, I want to just ask you guys, what could you possibly think of that would answer this question? In other words, the Gemara felt that this was not a knockout question. That means it had to feel that it had something. Let's review. Rav Nachman says you can combine 2 witnesses for dinei mamunot. That means that, in essence, they're combinable. We would not say that one guy from one window, one guy from the other one didn't see each other, is not a witness. They did not witness the event together. There were no 2 witnesses that witnessed it together. Because you see, they're combining it. If that's the case, so why don't we just combine it in the case of 2 and 2, in a scenario where that will save their life. It's the Gemara kasha, but the Gemara does not say tiyufta. That means that there had to be something about using Rav Nachman in this case that the Gemara was like, it's true, we could do that, but yeah.
Maybe it's because it's a leniency. We're not going to learn from a leniency on the overall rule.
No, what we're trying to do is learn to the leniency, and we don't do that. So we're leaving Rav Nachman as halacha in Dine Mamonot. So when it comes to money, isolated witnesses is enough.
But not capital.
But not capital.
1 and 1 is the issue?
Sorry?
Could it be that it's 1 and 1 as opposed to 2 and 2?
So why would that be a differentiation? In other words, you have to come up with a reason why in the Mishnah we would not apply Rav Nachman.
Yeah, why is it acceptable in Dinei Mamonot and not in capital?
Yeah.
It's a higher threshold.
And we're always going more, we're looking for every leniency. So it's not like we're not trying to get the leniency. I think the answer is, to me, I think the answer is, and again, it's not a good enough answer that the Gemara answers it. But the Gemara didn't like it. It's too messy. In other words, you're not combining them in a case where it's strict. And you are combining them in a case where it's lenient. It's all over the place.
It just feels like a stretch.
Like, they either are combinable or they're not combinable. You want to tell me that in the laws of capital punishment, you can't combine because for the law of capital punishment as a whole, we have a higher threshold. So therefore, we disallowed making isolated witnesses come together? Fine. But to tell me that it's not that we won't use it. It's just that we won't use it in a case where it works against you. It feels like there's no grip on what the halakha is.
You're picking and choosing.
So maybe that's why, even though I understand your point, that for a case of a kula, we'll employ it, right? But it seems a little haphazard in the way that we understand the halakha of isolated witnesses. And therefore, maybe the Gemara felt it was a good question why we don't say that in the Mishnah, but I understand why we would not have employed such a thing.
It doesn't leave you with a clear halacha direction.
Who?
If you went with that opinion,
Yeah.
right, it doesn't leave you with a clear distinction in the halacha.
It leaves you with a clear distinction vis-a-vis this case, but it doesn't leave you with a clear distinction with regards to the concept of edut miyuchedet. In other words, is isolated...
Combinable.
Exactly. Is it combinable or not? Rav Nachman has a very simple answer to that. Money, yes. Capital, no.
That's clear.
Rav Zutra is asking Rav Nachman to say, no. Also money, like when there's an advantage. Like just tell me, Rav Nachman maybe felt that, you know what, you can't do that. It either works or it doesn't work. So we don't look at the case and then say if we're going to do it or not. We look at the punishment and we say whether we're going to do it or not. And that we actually have case law to indicate that we differentiate between monetary and capital punishment on lots of different things. So therefore, I could decide capital versus money. I can't decide now within capital when it works for me, yes, when it doesn't work for me, no. Maybe that's the answer on the Gemara's, why it leaves it as a question.
Don't you have to have 3 in capital?
Sorry?
Don't you have to have 3 witnesses?
No. 2 or 3. Okay? The Gemara now continues. Rabbi Yossi says that you have to have 2 witnesses that are doing the hatra'ah, that are doing the warning, if you remember. Remember that? Rabbi Yossi said you need 2 witnesses. And we already had Rava that says differently. Rava says, obviously not like Rabbi Yossi, that if you have the guy says it himself, or the victim says it, or a shed says it, a demon says it, that would also count. So Rava is obviously not going like Rav Yossi. The Gemara says, but Rav Yossi at least, he holds that you need 2 witnesses. The Gemara says, Amar le Rav Papa le Abaya. Rav Papa, who's literally weediesing this whole situation up, says to Abaya, bomb question. Umi itle Rav Yossi hay svara. Could you say that that's true about Rav Yossi? V'atanan, the Mishnah says, Rav Yossi omer, hasoneh ne'erag. So Nathan Lowe, who I don't know if we pinged, but Nathan Lowe asked the question last week, and we're going to see Nathan's question in just a second. What about a scenario where I could assume that the person's intentions were sinister? In other words, if the guy says it, fine. If the shed says it, fine. If there's witnesses that say it, fine, okay? But what if Nobody says anything. But I know this guy hates the other fellow to the point where he's desperate to kill. If Esav kills Yaakov with no hatra, we know he wants him dead.
You can assume the intent is bad.
Could you assume that the intent there was there to kill him intentionally?
Then you don't need to warn.
Then you don't need to warn. Says the Gemara, there's a Mishnah that says that Rabbi Yossi teaches Hasoneh Neherag, that a person who hates somebody is killed even without hatra'ah. Mipnei why? Shehu kimu'ad umutra. Because he is like a person who's already considered like a mu'ad. What does mu'ad mean? He's set aside to do that, like a bull that hits once, twice, 3 times. You know this bull is a goring bull.
Prone to the...
He's gonna do this. So if this guy is a guy who hates his guts, we know he wishes him harm. So he's mu'ad umutra. It's as if he has a warning already. So maybe I don't even need to warn him. That's how Rav Yossi says. If that's the case, then I have Rav Yossi in this Mishnah who seems to be telling me, forget 2 witnesses, I don't even need 1 witness.
Just look at the guy.
Look at the guy. Now, 1 second. So you're going to say to me, okay, that's the case of Soneh. There's no contradiction. That case is where the guy hates him. We're talking about a regular case. The Gemara is not buying that. Because if it's a law that you need 2 witnesses, then it's a law of 2 witnesses. You can't tell me that if the guy hates him, then we already know it by ourselves.
Is it by intent or is it by witness?
Exactly. If it's by witnesses, the fact that we know something doesn't help us. The same way that if Moshe Rabbeinu walked in and said, Jack owes Stanley $100, I don't care that it's Moshe Rabbeinu. I know that it's true. It's not that I don't know that it's not true. Sorry, Moshe, I'm killing you on your birthday. Right? What's it called? I know it's true. I believe Moshe b'chol beiti ne'emanu. But the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu delivered to us tells us that you need 2. So if Rabbi Yossi says you need 2, it doesn't help that we know already. That's how the Gemara is understanding. So it would seem to contradict the Rabbi Yossi on Rabbi Yossi. So it can't be that Rabbi Yossi holds that. Says the Gemara, Amaleh, Abaya answered, Hahu Rabbi Yossi bar Yehudahi. That's a different Rabbi Yossi. There's 2 Rabbi Yossis in the Mishnah.
Yossi 1, Yossi 2.
Rabbi Yossi,
We're confusing already.
thing 1, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, he says, Soneh Neherag, that you could kill the guy if he's just a soneh, if he's a hater. Because I know that the guy is for sure going to kill anyway. This Rabbi Yossi is a different one. This Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta. Okay? Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta, that's the Rabbi Yossi of our Mishnah. So our Mishnah holds 2 witnesses. You don't have 1 witness, doesn't make a difference. You have shed, the guy said himself, none of those things count. You need 2 witnesses. Okay? However, the other one, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, he says no, it's just a matter of us knowing something. Says the Braita, the Tanya, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says in the Braita, yet another example of this concept. Chaver en tzarich hatra. Let's say you have a Talmid Chacham, a guy's a big rabbi. He knows the whole Torah by heart. Obviously, when he's killing this guy, he knows that the punishment for killing someone is...
Asked that question the other day.
Nathan asked this question.
Talmid Chacham.
That's what I was saying before. So your Yossi is an element of same thing as Nathan's question. Why? Why do we have hatra at all? What's the whole point of the warning?
Is that you should know the law.
So we could illustrate that this guy is not doing it by accident. What does it mean by accident? Not like he fell on the guy with a knife.
Unaware.
Intent.
It means that he's not aware that this is asur, or that the isur carries punishment X. Now that I've told him those 2 things, now the guy, he's forewarned. And if he decides to go through with it, I know that there's real intent to be able to do this, and it's on purpose. Okay? Full knowledge of what I'm doing, that it's asur, and as well what the punishment is going to be. Says the Gemara, so what happens when you have a Talmid Chacham who already knows that? So there, Rabbi Yossi says you don't have to do it. So you're finding another example of another Rabbi Yossi that also contradicts.
So it can't be the same person.
So again, this just bolsters Abaye's point that there's 2 Rabbi Yossis in this mix. One Rabbi Yossi that holds like what Rava was telling us before. Okay? One Rabbi Yossi that says the other one. Now, just an interesting point I wanted to bring up. Let's say, remember there was two opinions in Rava. Remember that? Rava said, even if the hatra'ah, the warning is given by himself. Two opinions. What does by himself mean? Rashi says, the victim. Rambam says, the murderer. Okay? So, two witnesses see a guy killing a guy. Let's go with Rashi's case for a minute. The victim himself says, don't kill me. If you kill me, you have death penalty, blah, blah, blah. Then he goes and he kills him. What's the halacha over there according to Rava? It's good enough. What does Rav Yossi say we said? The Rav Yossi of our Mishnah?
No.
No good, because you need two witnesses, correct? Okay. What would Rav Yossi of our Mishnah hold in Rambam's interpretation of the Gemara?
If the murderer...
Rambam learns, al pi atzmo means not the victim, but the murderer. What if the murderer says out loud, I know that I'm killing, I know it's asur, and I know there's a death penalty.
Is that still...
What does Rav Yossi hold? What do you need? Is that good?
Two.
You need two. We only have one. But we already have this law, hoda'at ba'al din. Whenever a ba'al din, someone himself says about himself, we said earlier, if the guy says, I admit, one ed who bears witness on himself, kime'a edim dami. It's like 200 witnesses. So maybe in the case of Rambam, the way Rambam learns the Gemara, if the murderer says, I know, and I the halakha, and the death penalty, it's as if he was warned by two people. Maybe Rav Yossi would agree with Rava in Rambam's interpretation. What do you think?
No, but then you still try and get the kula. Now, wouldn't you aren't they still trying to find an easy way to not kill someone?
My question is not whether there are other opinions. I'm just asking, what does Rav Yossi hold? What does he actually hold? He holds that you need two witnesses. Okay, fine. I have two witnesses. Because hoda'at ba'alin kimea edim dami. The admission of a person is considered the validity of two witnesses.
The person he killed, isn't he his second witness?
No, because they're not combining to say, they're not testifying.
It'd be hard to get his testimony.
You hear that?
Especially after the mother.
On his last will.
You hear that, guys?
Yeah, he said, I saw it.
So it's very interesting because even though technically it works to say that Rav Yossi would hold that would work because he says two witnesses, but when the person himself, the hoda'at ba'al din, the one who's going to bear the brunt of this punishment, if he admits fault, we trust him like 100 witnesses. Okay, I don't know that would be enough. Let me tell you why. If you take a look at how the Gemara explained Rav Yossi bar Yehuda. If you have a Torah scholar and the Torah scholar kills someone, he doesn't need to be warned. Why? Because what is the purpose of hatra'ah? What's the purpose of warning?
To be aware.
To tell the difference
To inform.
between a shogeg and mezid. So if we know that there's no difference in shogeg and mezid, that we know there's a difference in shogeg and mezid over here, that the guy's a mezid, he's on purpose intentional, then I have everything I need. But that's Rav Yossi bar Yehuda's interpretation of what hatra'ah is. Clearly, Rav Yossi in our Mishnah, Rav Yossi bar Chalafta, does not agree that that's what hatra'ah is. Because if he agreed, then when you know that the guy knows, you shouldn't need witnesses. So how does he understand what is the purpose, the function of hatra'ah? He understands that a formal part of the process of capital punishment is that the guy needs to be warned by two witnesses. So to use hoda'at ba'al din, that it's considered as if we believe you like we believe two witnesses. That's not a formal representation by two witnesses to the guy who's killing. So therefore, it could very well be, even though logically it works,
But
technically it does not.
But also the Hoda'at Ba'aldin is in front of a judge. When he says, it was me, I did it. In this case, he's just saying, I know if I kill you, I'm going to die and I'm not allowed to do it.
No. So now, in other words, now I have two witnesses who witnessed a Hoda'at Ba'aldin. I don't need him to say it. I just need them to establish that he said it. So they walk in and they say, we saw the guy killed. You know what else we saw? Because you're going to be worried about hatra'ah. We witnessed the statement.
He said that.
You see? So they bring you, the two edim are verifying that there was a hoda'at baldin. Okay?
Then it will be okay.
Then
So,
it works,
no,
because you have two
No, he's
witnesses.
saying-
no, that's what I'm saying.
Because you have two
No,
witnesses.
Even there,
Because they didn't give him the hot
in
Then
Revi,
they warn.
in Revi Yossi, right, he holds that you need a formal warning by two people. The fact that halachically there's this idea that when you admit something, we believe you with the validity of two witnesses, that doesn't create a warning statement said by two witnesses formally. So again, it's very interesting to see how Rav Yossi would understand that case according to Rava. So I think that it still would not work. Says the Gemara, Davar acher, another interpretation. We want to make sure that the Sanhedrin does not hear the words of the testimony from a translator. It's got to be directly from the mouth of the Edim. Says the Gemara, we had a case, Hanu Loazi. You had a couple of people that were speaking Laz. What does Laz mean? Laz means a foreign language, a language which is not Lashon Kodesh, which is not Hebrew language.
It's anything.
What does Laz stand for? Lashon Avodah Zarah.
Greek?
Yeah.
Wow.
Any.
Oh, any?
Yeah.
Is that English too?
Yeah. So in other words, the way Israel speaks about non-Israel, like you know, there's people, the Jews say there's the Jews and non-Jews. You know, like imagine ants saying about the world. So guys, there's us, there's ants, and there's the non-ants. So humans, mammals, reptiles, we're the tiniest. But Hakol B'Shvil Israel, right? You know, we know our importance in quality, so we're able to say that. But that's really what's happening. That's really what's happening over here, right? We have Hebrew, and everything else is Lashon Avodah Zarah. Okay, fine. Hanu Loazi, you have the people that are speaking another language, not Hebrew. They came in front of Rava. Oki Rava Meturgaman Benayu. He set up a translator in between them. Everyone wanted to know, 1 second, we just learned this Mishnah, you can't have a translator in a Beit Din. The Gemara says, how could he have done so? Didn't we learn that Sanhedrin can't hear through the Meturgaman, through a translator? The Gemara answers, correct. Rava medahava yada madahava amri. He understood everything they were saying. He just wasn't well versed enough to speak that language and say it back to them. So he had a translator to be able to communicate his psak back to them. And that is not a problem of, of witnesses. Now, someone asked a question. We said over here Sanhedrin. Is that specifically Sanhedrin or not? And we answered back then that no, it's not specifically Sanhedrin, it's any Beit Din. This is the proof. Because Rava did not sit on Sanhedrin. Rava was after the time when the Sanhedrin was disbanded. Rava sat on a Beit Din. And still the Gemara asked, how could he have had a translator? We hold that Sanhedrin can't. So you see the Gemara when it said, the Mishnah when it said Sanhedrin was not speaking specifically about the Sanhedrin in the Beit HaMikdash. It was referring to all courts. Okay? But this also answers the converse question that we had last time. Someone asked, I don't understand, where is this relevant? Since Sanhedrin is obligated to speak all the languages, where's ever there going to be a case where they don't understand? The answer is when the person is not on the Sanhedrin. Right. When you're in a regular Beit Din, regular Beit Din has no such requirement to speak all the languages.
Because the question was relating to Mordechai, right?
Mordechai, exactly. We said that's how he understood Bigtan Vateresh, because they were talking in Tarshish, okay? So that's the answer. The answer is that this halakha applies to every Beit Din, and at the same time, even though it applies to every Beit Din, the law of speaking every language as a judge does not apply only to Sanhedrin. Okay. Now the Gemara is going back to another element of pasul, of something which is nimtza karova pasul, if they're found to be relatives or pasul. So let's see what that means. Ila'a v'tuvya kreve da'ar v'havu.
Oh, well. Okay. Can we do a translation on those words?
Yeah, none of these are as hard as they seem. The first two words are names. Okay?
that helps.
So Ila'a and Tovia, these two people, Kireve, Karov, are related. Okay? De Arva, Havu. The Arva is Arev, is someone who signs on a loan as a Arev, as like a co-signer. Okay? So
Guarantor?
on a loan, exactly. So Ila'a and Tuvia were both related to the co-signer of a loan. All right? Now they have a court case on this loan comes up. Savar of Papa, the man of Papa thought to say, Gabelo ve'umalve richikininu, that they're allowed to bear witness with regards to a dispute between the borrower and the lender, right? Because they're only related to the co-signer. It's nothing to do with the borrower and the lender, right? Amalei Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, said to Rav Papa, Ilet le lelove lav batar arve azil malve. I don't understand you. What are you thinking? What are you thinking here? Again, Rav Papa swinging for the fences, right? What are you talking about? It's true. You want these guys to come and give testimony that the guy owes the love this money, or that he paid this back, or he didn't pay this back. At the end of the day, if there's no money in the lover's pocket, who's paying that money? The co-signer's paying. If that's the case, so it matters that they're related to that guy because they have an impetus or a reason to not tell the truth. Now, there's two ways of understanding this Gemara. The first way of understanding this Gemara is that they have a vested interest in making sure that the guy who borrowed the money will pay back.
They will pay back. Why? Because then it
Then
can't.
they're held
Doesn't,
Because it doesn't come to my relative, the
but
co-signer.
if it comes to the relative and they're the witnesses of the loan, they can't be witnesses, can they?
No, forget that. This is a court case between the Love and the Malve, okay? Let's say about whether or not he paid. So he thought to say, one second, right? Rav Papa thought to say, these guys want to come now and testify. We were present when the guy paid back $500 of a $1,000 loan. We saw it. Rav Papa thought, what's the problem? They're bearing testimony. They're not related to the Love or the Malve. They're only related to the cosigner. This has nothing to do with the cosigner. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? But if the Love now doesn't have enough money to pay, who does it go to? It goes to the cosigner. So that they might be protecting the cosigner. So they're karov. Now, there's two ways of understanding Gemara. One way of understanding Gemara is, how could we trust them? Maybe they're lying to protect their brother.
Themselves.
Then they themselves are not in this.
No.
They're just related to the guy who's going to pay
In
out.
case of a default.
Hold on, you're my brother, okay?
Yep.
Me and him, the two of us are your brothers. Two brothers of you. You co-signed on a loan between Jack and Harry, okay? Now Jack says, I paid back half of the loan, right? We walk in and we say, we saw half of the loan get paid back. He thought, there's nothing to do, I'm not related to him, not related to him. The Gemara answered, it's true, but I'm related to you. And if he can't pay the full loan, right, because you're not going to accept my testimony, or you will, what will happen? The loan will default, he'll come to you, and now you're going to pay. So we are related to the case. We're close, we're relatives, we have a vested interest in saying that he paid back. So one way of understanding the Gemara is, and therefore we're lying.
Or we can't be trusted. Not necessarily lying.
And therefore we can't be trusted. I'm going to categorize those together.
Right.
The second way of understanding this, we already said this before. If me and Jean-Luc were not me and Jean-Luc, we were Moshe and Aharon,
Still no good.
and he would be our brother,
Doesn't matter.
it still would be no good. It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of establishing that you guys are related. The minute you're related, your testimony is invalid. So the question is my testimony about this connected to the fact that I'm related? Am I related to this case when I bear testimony or not? Once the Gemara says, I'm obviously related, because if there's a default on the loan, you're the one, you're the payee, in a certain sense, maybe what the Gemara is saying is that you're part loveh.
Loveh means what?
Loveh is the borrower.
To the,
Malve is the one that lends. You're part of team borrower. So I'm testifying about something that relates to you, even if it's indirectly. Okay?
So you
Is that
avoid.
clear?
Does this-
So avoid.
does
And
that-
therefore, Ila'ah and Tuvya were not allowed to give testimony
Does
about it.
that disqualify the whole loan as having proper witnesses to begin with?
No, by the way, if we witnessed the whole thing, probably, yes, it would disqualify the whole thing. But that's not the case. There's other witnesses that saw this loan, and there's other witnesses that saw, him sign, and there's a shtar that establishes all that. You don't need us for that. Now you want to use me for a case which is between the two of you, right? But will have ramifications for this. By the way, I was thinking to myself after seeing this Gemara, let's say it's not about the loan at all. Let's say the two of you are arguing about a piece of real estate. You say he didn't buy it from you. He says he bought it from you. Nothing to do with the loan. But it's a monetary thing for you whilst having this loan.
Saying it makes him more creditworthy or less
Yeah.
creditworthy?
Yeah, so which is going to affect you. How far down this rabbit hole would we go?
Right, how many derivatives until it's...
Right? Where does this end?
I don't think you have to go very far. If it DQ'd, you DQ'd.
Yeah, but at what point of closeness would we say DQ'd?
Even if you're 1%,
Like imagine we say like this. So maybe Jean-Luc and I should not be able to bear witness on Marco. You know why? Because if Marco Barminan has a difficult business day, then that's going to have a knock-on effect to the other guy, and that's going to make him give less money to the shul. Then I'm going to approach Jack, and Jack's going to have less money. You understand?
How far?
Where does that end? So for sure, when it comes to matters of the loan, we have the Gemara. But since the Gemara brings the logic of it, that if he has less money, ilet lelelove, lav bata arva azil malve, so now we don't know how far does this go.
I would say it would have to be the case as it unfolds would have to directly impact that person. So, as an example, in the case that we just learned, right?
Yeah.
If the guy defaults, he's on the hook. So that case immediately it changed his position. Whereas in a derivative, it's a hypothetical still. It makes him less creditworthy, more creditworthy, but it still doesn't fall on the other person, the karov.
but you're still a counterparty to the agreement.
It could.
Even
fall
if
on
even
both
if
But you can,
even though the probability is low, it's still you're still a
could.
party.
if I said that because of that Marco will not offer a good kiddush on the shul, then I will not benefit, so where is the limit? That's the question I think. No?
I think in general, we're not going to start establishing way out there cases. But once the Gemara told us specifically with regards to this, that if the loved does not have the money, it's going to fall to you and we're related to you. So it makes sense that I'm going to try and protect you having the money to be able to pay back that loan. And that would even be a case between you and him. You guys are fighting. I know if you don't have money, what's going to happen? That's going to fall to him. He's my brother. I don't want that to happen. So I'll vote for you in favor instead of you.
Because you always have an interest in this.
Because I have an interest. Yeah?
Of my brother.
Now remember, there's two pshatim in the Gemara. One pshat is that it's about saving my brother. But actually, as I explained to you earlier, it doesn't matter about trust and lies. It's whether you're DQ'd, like you said. Right? And by the way, just check this out. The halakha would be the same if I go against my brother. Oh. What happens if I say, listen, believe me, I'm telling you the truth. Believe me, I would want my brother to be in a better position. I'm telling you what I saw. And I go against my own brother. Also disqualified.
Karov is karov.
Karov is karov. Karov is disqualified. Chalas. Okay? So the question is how far you would go. I imagine it would only be because, like we say, en la davar sof. That is a line that we use many, many times in the Gemara, where there's no end to such a thing. So what do? We make it the most logical extension of that element. So with regards to the two of you saying that you have matters of the loan, it would be pasul. Anything which is not connected to the loan itself would already be allowed. Okay. Should we start the Mishnah? Or maybe we have to end here. My watch is on upside down. So
11:02.
It's 11:02. Okay, so let's call it a day. We'll pick up from the Mishnah over here. Be'ezat Hashem. Last, we should finish the first perek on what's it called? Very soon. It's also very appropriate that on Zayin Adar we managed to exactly get to Daf Zayin. Literally, the first two lines on Zayin Adar. It should be a zechut for Moshe Rabbeinu. He should study Torah with us in Shamayim.
Amen.
He should make sure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the spirit of Torah and the ability to learn everything and to understand. Lilmod, Ulamed, Lishmor, V'la'asot, Me'ata v'ad olam. Oshia et amecha barech et nachater urem v'naseem ad haolam. Yes, we have some ladies behind you. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash